Hello everyone, welcome to MCCALL Voices, a series of conversations featuring scholars and students of the Department of MCCALL, Media, Communications, Creative Arts, Languages and Literature of Macquarie University. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land upon which this university is situated, the MCCALL people of the Darug Nation, whose cultures and customs have nurtured and continue to nurture this land since the dream time. We pay our respect to the Darug people and the MCCALL clan. We also wish to acknowledge the elders of the Darug Nation, past, present, and future, and pay our respect to them. So thank you everyone for coming here. Today we will talk about researching between cultures, but first of all, let me just talk a little bit about what MCCALL Voices is. So this is the inaugural event of MCCALL Voices 2023, Crossing Borders. This is a series of conversations of international research and experiences of scholars and students of MCCALL. We are exploring questions such as what are the opportunities and challenges in doing research crossing national and cultural boundaries, what are the current trends in international research, how to navigate life and career as international students and global researchers. MCCALL Voices originally appeared as a platform for MCCALL students to share their academic interests, projects, and stories, but this year's edition of MCCALL Voices focuses not just on students, but also academic staff, HDR researchers doing international research. We are focusing on culturally and linguistically diverse scholars, as well as international students. So today's topic is researching between cultures. We are exploring several questions here. How does travel shape direction of research? How does the embodied experience of living in between cultures influence research interests and methodologies? And now we have this panel featuring culturally and linguistically diverse scholars, or called scholars, who will share their stories behind research, academic and creative research, as well as their international background. And I will be joining them in conversation. So I will introduce each of the speakers here, including myself. So first we have Dr. Chavalin Svetanant. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yes.
So Chavalin is a senior lecturer at the Department of Media, Communications, Creative Arts, Language and Literature. She is a member of the Multilingualism Research Center at Macquarie University. She has been teaching Japanese studies at Macquarie since 2008. She grew up in Thailand before traveling to Kyoto, Japan to complete her master's degree and PhD in Japanese linguistics. Her expertise lies at the intersection of language and culture with a primary focus on media and communication studies in comparative cultural context. Now we'll explore more of this background. And we also have Dr. Iqbal Barkat, who is a digital artist. He is a filmmaker as well. He's a proponent and practitioner of community and participatory arts. His most recent project is Idam, a multi-arts hybrid performance inspired by ancient Tamil poetry. His most recent film is an observational documentary on a primary school in Western Sydney. This is Our School. Iqbal was born in Singapore, where he founded the now disbanded political theatre company, Gung Ho Theatre Ensemble. He teaches screen practice at Macquarie University, Sydney. And I am Intan Paramaditha. I am a senior lecturer here at Macquarie. I teach media and film studies. I'm also a fiction writer, and my creative and academic research focuses on the questions of travel, immobility, mobility and immobility, power, as well as anti-colonial feminist knowledge production. So we'll talk more about our background. Right, so we will be in conversation with each other. I will ask a question. I will also answer the question myself. Let's start with the first question. You've heard about the speaker's bios, but I would like to explore more. So how would you describe yourself? Could you introduce yourself? What are you focusing on as an academic? Maybe we can start with Iqbal.
I think the introduction that Intan you gave was really good. I describe myself in those terms. I'm a digital artist. I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I work across multiple forms. Basically, I also try to explore the intersections between screen and performance. So a lot of my screen-based works are projected on screen while there are live performers who are performing through them. So I believe that I'm also a hybrid artist, and I believe this word hybrid is really important to me because I think in a way hybrid works become almost a metonym of creativity itself. Yeah, so I think hybridity is important, but also because my works happen at the intersection between the real and the imagined, and so they are hybrid works, and that's how I choose to define hybridity. I work across multiple forms, as I mentioned, and I'm also a documentary filmmaker as well, so I've made traditional documentaries as well. As Intan, you mentioned my most recent work, which was produced last year at the Paramaditha Riverside Theatre, is Idem, or Place, Idem Place, basically that's the title, where I was exploring the idea of landscapes in Tamil Sangam poetry, that they are 5th century BCE poems from Tamil Nadu in South India. And what I did there was I had a singer who sang those poems both in English and in Tamil, and I filmed landscapes across New South Wales. I put these landscapes behind a dancer that I filmed in our studios here, a Bharatanatyam dancer. So basically it was like a conversation across time, across places, between two individuals. In a way, it's a love story, but what I was actually interested in exploring was ideas on landscape which decenters the human in a way, or at least fundamentally accepts the equal importance of both the human and the non-human. And so also the kind of mutual implications that we as human beings have in our natural environment. I find these poems, even though they are written in the 5th century BCE, to be extremely radical. So I was exploring that as well. And as you also mentioned, my most recent film, it's a documentary, observational documentary, and it's a long-form observational documentary in a primary school in Western Sydney called This Is Our School. The school is Maryland's East Public. We filmed for an entire year in the school from the first day of term to the last day of term 4, and we were given amazing access. The film is still available on SBS On Demand for those who are interested. It's called This Is Our School. I personally think it's an achievement because there has never been a camera that has looked that closely at what happens in a primary school, personally, at least not in Australia. Yeah.
Fantastic. We'll talk more about your projects, wonderful projects. So what about you, Chavalin? How would you describe yourself and the focus of your research?
Thank you for having me today. It's really exciting to hear a lot from both of you. So for myself, I would call myself a linguist. I'm working, as you say at the beginning, I'm working at the intersection between language and culture, and to see how they work together in specific contexts. So I would call myself a discourse analyst as well. So I'm doing research in advertising discourse, political discourse, and also media discourse. So looking at Japanese resources, Thai resources, and also Australian resources, and I do a comparative study and see how kind of language shape how people interact with each other, and vice versa. So yeah, I think recently my projects moving from kind of a linguistic project to what we call cross-disciplinary project, because I'm working in collaboration with other disciplines. For example, my recent project with DFAT, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, right? So they funded me to do the comparative responses of COVID during the COVID in Thailand and in Australia. So I have political scientists in our team. I have anthropologists in our team, and we're trying to see something that beyond the science. So if COVID is about science, about illness, but how about looking at the socio-cultural sides of COVID? What kind of influence, what kind of impact that they had for people in Thailand and Australia? Yeah, that's it. Stop for now.
Okay, great. Yeah, so my research, I do academic as well as creative research, and my research questions focus around, one, the question of travel and mobility, so who can travel and what circulates. So in the context of global media and transnational cultural production, and this is the question of travel is something that I incorporate in my interactive novel. It's a novel where you can choose your own path. It's called The Wandering. It explores the different positions of travelers, tourists, migrants, refugees. So I'm really interested in the power and privileges of travel, and who keeps encountering boundaries, right? Which really depends on the color of your skin, your gender, factors such as disability. So that's my first interest. My second interest is about anti-colonial feminist knowledge production. So it's really questioning the constructions of knowledge production that are colonial, capitalist, and also patriarchal, heteropatriarchal, through a feminist lens. My short story collection, Apple and Knife, is a collection of short stories about women who resist confinements of structural confinements. And currently, I'm working on, well, first I'm working on an anthology with my colleagues, Jangjan, Debashri Mukherjee, Sangjun Lee. We are co-editing an anthology, the Routledge anthology of Asian cinemas. So it's really looking at Asian cinemas in transnational ways. We're working on that, but I also have another academic project that's based on my involvement, my I would say cultural activist work with a collective in Indonesia called Sekolah Pemikiran Perempuan. We are really exploring ways of interrogating knowledge production, but from the perspective of women in the global South. Yeah, so that's for me.
Oh, thank you both for sharing your research interests. So next one, the question that I would like to ask is, now, where did you grow up and how did you end up teaching here at Macquarie? So, Iqbal.
Thanks, Chavalin. Yeah, I was born in Singapore. I grew up in Singapore, obviously, and I was a drama teacher and a theatre practitioner in Singapore for a long time. We did political theatre under the radar of the authoritarian Singaporean state for many years. And as we progressed, we discovered that it was just harder and harder to practice political theatre in Singapore. Singapore in the mid-90s to the late 90s was moving from political censorship, from direct political censorship to self-censorship. And as we know, what happens in those circumstances is always self-censorship is far more conservative because you can get around the state, but it's very hard to get around your own thoughts. So I think the theatre scene in Singapore became a lot more conservative. And also at that time, the group that I was with, we were a collective, we were an ensemble, we were quite a strong collective. We were thinking about going our separate ways as well, as the practice became a lot more untenable. I was also looking to do high degree research, and so at that time, I was a professional. It was quite easy to emigrate to Australia, and at that time as well, as a migrant, you had a lot of access to education. For example, education was free, not totally free, but it was cheaper than it is today. It was affordable. So it was the only way where I could do high degree research. So I came to Sydney to do high degree research at Western Sydney University. At the same time, I was also started to explore cinema as well, as both as form, as a thinking modality. And I wanted to do both. Both wanted to think about cinema as a practice, but also make films. And so I did my PhD at Western Sydney on novelty in cinema. What is it to think the new in cinema? What do we call the new, for example? And so I explored that through the cinema of Jigar Vertov, who was a revolutionary filmmaker from the earlier 20th century from the Soviet Union. He made a number of fantastic experimental documentaries, and Vertov explored the relationship between, for him, cinema was a fundamental new way of looking at the world, to explore the relationship between a technology and the world. So so he established something quite radically new. It was also the time where cinema was new. There were manifestos being written about cinema, and Vertov wrote many manifestos himself. And he had a great motto, for example, which is still, I think, a powerful one, is life caught unawares, which really excited me, which meant not the kind of basic idea that people has about cinema just being an instrument of surveillance, which it is. But I think for Vertov, what cinema offers us is a kind of decoding of the world, a new understanding of the world, how we can actually use this understanding to progress our life in the world. So I did that at Western Sydney Uni, and I started teaching at Western Sydney Uni. I loved teaching there because many of my students were the first people in their households to go to university, for example. I felt I was doing some good. And also because of the fact that, in a sense, they had no baggage, they were very open to whatever was being offered to them. So, for example, I could show them Derek Jarman's Blue, for example, and they'll be excited by Derek Jarman's Blue. I think it's very different in very middle class places around. Then what happened was I taught at Western Sydney for 10 years, and then long story short, Macquarie had an opening. But one of the reasons why I must say I was really excited about coming to Macquarie was, as Intan mentioned, I am a community filmmaker. Community filmmaking is a very distinctive practice. It's about how filmmakers collaborate with communities to advance the interests of communities. So I was already doing that work with my students at Western Sydney, sending filmmaking students out into the community to collaborate with communities, making films together. But it was always in an unofficial capacity. So there was quite not much institutional support for what I really wanted to do with my students. But at Macquarie, they had started the PACE program, which is, which is a kind of community engagement, participation and community engagement, and that was made compulsory for every single student at Macquarie University, which I thought was a brilliant program. And so I could see how I could basically use the PACE program to send my students out into the community to make community films, and I'm still doing that. So I've been at Macquarie for 10 years now. And I'm still doing that. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. A lot of things that impressed me from your story. How about you, Intan? Where did you grow up, and how did you end up here?
Yeah, so I was born in Bandung. I mean, if you are, familiar with the whole scholarship of decolonization, that's the city where they organized the Bandung Conference, where Asian and African delegates from Asian and African countries met, and they declared their anti-colonial stance in 1955. But I grew up in Jakarta, and then, so the question of travel is always something I'm thinking about. Eventually I went outside Indonesia because of a scholarship from the US government. I got a Fulbright scholarship. Without that scholarship, I wouldn't have been able to travel. So it's really the question of who can travel and who remains within certain boundaries, and who's funding that, whose money is involved. So I got a scholarship in 2005 to do my master's at the University of California, San Diego. I did English literature, and before that I did my BA at the Universitas Indonesia, University of Indonesia, also in English literature. And then during my time in San Diego at the University of California, I became really interested in the new wave of Indonesian cinema. They emerged after the authoritarian regime, which ended in 1998. I was really interested in the question of what you can do in a relatively freer, democratized climate. There were so many new initiatives, and it was really an exciting time because people experimented with a lot of styles, a lot of forms. I'm sure it also happened, 2098, 2008, across Southeast Asia, right? So it's really exciting. And I became really interested in that. So I applied for some PhD programs in film studies, and the only university that accepted me was New York University, so I went there. I got a full scholarship from NYU. So I moved from California to New York. I lived there for about maybe 8 years. I taught at Sarah Lawrence College, which is also in New York, but outside New York City. I taught film history after I graduated in 2014. And then I was looking for a more like a permanent job, and I found the opportunity at Macquarie University. So I applied, and then that's how I got here. I've been here since 2016. I teach. I'm very happy actually with the classes that I teach here at Macquarie. I teach for the postgraduate unit. I teach global media issues in contemporary global media, and I'm really excited about that. And for the undergrad units, I teach screens, images, ideas, which is really exploring the question of travel in cinema and television on screens, basically. And I also teach visual media and communications here. Yeah.
So you chose to stay in Australia, not in the US?
for now.
I hope you
Yeah.
you don't regret your decision.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So for me, my story probably a little bit more simple. I was born and raised in Bangkok, the capital city of Thailand, and then in the undergraduate study, I chose to major in Japanese, and that's because my dad did. He was a researcher as well, so he did research with Japanese people, and then when I was a child, I usually get a gift from Japanese people. So I feel like, oh, this people from this country is so nice. Always give me lots of snack and toys, and so I kind of wanted to know more about them and want to talk to them. So yeah, when I started to do my undergraduate study, I chose to do Japanese, and then when I graduated, I got Japanese government scholarship to go to study in Japan. So I chose to do Japanese linguistics at Kyoto University, where I study a lot of things that I have never learned before when I was in Thailand. So it was like ancient Japanese, like the old script, something that I was like, why did I come here? So there were times that I wanted to give up, but then yeah. So thankfully, thanks to myself that time that I didn't give up and then continue to do that until I finished my master and PhD. And then I went back to Thailand to teach at the same university where I graduated, Chavalin University, for about 3.5 years. And there I, because of the family issue, because that time my boyfriend, that time who became my partner now, he still stay in Japan. So I got fellowship to work at research institute in Japan. So I went back to Japan for another year. And then from there, his family, who already migrated here in Sydney, called him. You need to come here. This is the great country. You will enjoy it. So he's Chinese. So his mom, it's very personal. Sorry, I hope his mom won't see this video. So his mom called us from Japan, and we were like, "Where is Australia? We never know Australia before. Like, the only thing that I heard is Sydney Olympic, which is in 2000." And then I was like, we wanted to stay in Japan, but then his mother insists that you have to come. And then for maybe Chinese traditional norm that you need to listen to your parents. Right? So we said, okay, we just came just to tick the box, and we stayed here to validate the visa, because he got the visa from his family. Just validate the visa for 2 years, and then we go back to Japan. But then we never went back again. We love it here. We don't want to go back to Japan. Oh no, we don't want to work there. It is a lot better work-life balance here. So yeah, so when I came here, I didn't have a job. And then I tried a few places, but I think the major that I have for Japanese studies, and with my background, it's very specific. I would say like what you call a blue ocean. So I couldn't even find a position to apply. So unless there's a Japanese studies, which is not very often that they would open, but yeah. So luckily, when I came a few months later, after I arrived, Macquarie opened a position for Japanese studies. Yeah, and then I got the position, and then I stayed from 2008. Yeah.
Fantastic, cool, great. What a exciting, interesting history. Intan, I just wanted to, not a question, but just to comment on what you said about the fall of the New Order government in Indonesia, but also the kind of repercussions that were felt in Thailand as well as in Singapore or Malaysia. It's a kind of interesting time. I think it's still not fully explored. What happened with the financial crisis. I'm really interested in what happened in the histories of the cinemas in Malaysia after the financial crisis, for example, because you're right, in a sense it announced a new possibility, which I think in a way has been thwarted in many ways. So it's kind of interesting that that's part of your research, and it's something that I'm also thinking about. Cool. So, yeah, this is the question that I've been asked to ask. So I'll ask that to Intan first. Intan, as a scholar, you have traveled transnationally and culturally across places, cultures, and languages. How does travel shape directions of your research? How has the embodied experience of living in between cultures influenced your research interests and methodologies?
Yeah, thank you, Iqbal. So it's really interesting to hear from you and how I think to some extent your travel has also influenced your research. I mean, Iqbal, you are really exploring like a diversity of cultures in Western Sydney. Also, now you go to ancient Tamil poetry. Look at this exploration, and you are also Chavalin. You are exploring the connection between Thailand and Japan. You're going back and forth between cultural references. I think maybe because of our cultural encounters, we tend to think in a way that's transcending borders. We tend to think transnationally. And also because we are in a way from, let's quote unquote, minority cultures, we are always asked to explain why does that matter. Right? If you do research on American media, you won't get that kind of question, right? So that's why, because we always get that kind of question, why does that matter? And also because of our travel, I always try to make connection between one cultural phenomena, a cultural phenomenon in one place and another place. So I feel like it's really important to see anything from a more global perspective, how one thing is really shaped by global cultural flows. Again, I mentioned about the question of where is the money from, right? Because the capital transnationalizes, right? And also what kind of knowledge is viewed as valid, or what kind of knowledge is being accessed, and where is that knowledge from? I feel like, for instance, if I do feminist research, a lot of people would cite Western feminist theories, and then where we have so many local feminist theories, probably they're not articulated through formal academic languages. So for me, it's really important to transnationalize, but also to be very aware how our research is located within a larger global structures of power, because it's always the question of who is being cited, right? Whose voices are being heard, yeah, just to be aware of the larger connection and of the ongoing colonial structures that we are living in, including, well, academia. The academia is very much embedded in coloniality, I would say. Yeah.
You know, that's so true and really resonates with me as well. I think one of the questions that I got when I wanted to research Jiga Vertov was people asked me, that's not your culture.
You're not allowed to.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm just, I was shocked coming from Singapore because, you know, for us, we thought everything was our culture, right? The global culture is our culture, and I think it's kind of important to adopt those notions as well. You know, yeah. So that's great. And so Chavalin, about you, can you discuss the idea of travel? I think it's kind of interesting that Intan has broadened the meaning of travel into almost thinking about travel in a more expanded sense, as in, you know, traveling as in researching as well between cultures.
Inside and outside, yes.
Yeah.
So I think this question is the most difficult question that I have received from this session so far. So it took me a while to reflect on how I come up with the research that I'm doing right now. So yeah, for me, it's traveling across different cultures, different places. I talk to myself a lot about this. Also, the way that the question asked me, like how it shaped direction of my research, right? But I think it doesn't only shaped the direction of my research, but it's in fact the foundation of my research, because it leads to the research question that I have, and also it's kind of, all of the curiosity that I have that brought me here today, and yeah, as a researcher. So just let me give you an example. When I was studying in Japan during the first year, I kind of switched from using Thai language to Japanese language the whole time, right? So the first year, like, I finally got more comfortable speaking Japanese, and it became more natural to me. And then one day my supervisor asked me, do you miss your family in Thailand? And he asked me in Japanese, "Kasukuni aitai desu ka?" And then the word aitai in Japanese means to want to meet. So literally it means, do you want to meet your family in Thailand? Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, having been there for a year, and then it's in my early 20s, I definitely miss my family, but I don't have a feeling to want to meet them yet. Like, you know, like the feeling of to miss someone, it's just to think of them, right? You don't necessarily want to meet them. So I was like, I didn't know how to phrase my answer with that very simple question. And that day I started to think, oh, well, there's a different way of expressing things. So in Japanese, I can't even say I miss someone. I have to think of them and want to meet them. And that's the way the Japanese think about the concept of the word, to miss someone. So yeah, it's the first time that I kind of think more deeply about the language and culture that embody in the language. And then this kind of thing kind of opened my eyes to the fact that Japanese it's different from Thai, not just the surface, but more deeply how they express themselves. So I end up that led me to later explore the topic of my master and PhD research as words expressing emotive connotation and mentality in Japanese and Thai, and that's my PhD thesis. So yeah, I use a lot more approaches, historical approaches, to see how Japanese express themselves in the past, comparing to Thai in the past, how they have developed through the times and that kind of thing. So yeah, talking about the methodology in the question, I think my academic work, including my publication, as you can hear from me, that it's come from my own curiosity. So it's kind of an influence of my own personal experience of living in between cultures. So it's something that I observe from within myself and observe from how people communicated to each other. So I think for me, and I usually talk about this to my PhD, HDR student, that I don't have a preference, a certain preference, linguistic methodologies, but I usually start from the research question, and then I will find what kind of methodology that can best answer to my research question, and then I just go for it. So yeah, in my research, I use many methodologies.
Yeah, no, great. I think, what a fantastic, insight that the personal has in a way towards, a larger body of work that you are doing, Chavalin. I think that's fantastic. But coming back to this idea of travel itself, right, just the travel, and I think, travel implies exploration, freedom, maybe even joy. Perhaps there's definitely a strong affective element to it. And I think that in a way, as a migrant, as immigrants, that in a sense, that is lost to us. Because for me personally, when I think about traveling, it's always going back home, right? Going back to visit loved ones, So in a sense, I travel very little actually since I've come to Australia. But I think someone like a filmmaker whom I really love, like Clara Law, for example, explores this really well. So what happens psychologically, affectively, when someone emigrates, right? And I think they become, in a way, a ghost. They no longer have a place of belonging. and you know, like think about that tragic consequence in her film, like Farewell China, for example, or even actually all her films explore that really, really dramatically well. So, yeah. So in a sense, I think, but I think being a ghost is also quite powerful in a way. You know, it allows us, I think, to perhaps you know, explore something quite deeply without that strong nationalistic perhaps association. Yeah, so that's quite empowering as well. But having said that though, when I do travel, I travel with the naivety of a child, right? For me, everything is wonderful, everything is interesting. There's nothing which is not interesting. I love that, and I think that's really useful for me as a filmmaker. Like recently, I was in French Polynesia, for example, and one of the things that really excited me was the kind of they had so many chickens everywhere, wild chickens, right? I mean, French Polynesia is interesting. The fauna is very interesting. There are very few wild fauna in French Polynesia. So if you go walking on the islands, for example, it's full of chickens. And the chickens are, I would say, are some of the most beautiful chickens I've seen in my entire life. They had this glorious, shiny coat. So as a filmmaker, I'm interested in trying to represent those textures, those feelings, the sounds that the chicken make. But also, you know, it also allows me to think deeper as well, like why are there so many wild chickens in French Polynesia? So in a sense, there are also questions of political economy. Like I've never been to a place, you know, we travel through Asia a lot, where, for example, you would see chicken rearing, very common. You know, people would have a chicken coop and that's the main source of protein. Very similar in French Polynesia, is the main source of protein, but people don't keep chickens. They prefer to buy the chickens from the supermarket, chickens that come from New Zealand, or the US or even France, but you know, so I was wondering, like, why is it that the French Polynesians do not, you know, rear chickens, for example? Even eggs, they tend to buy eggs, for example, from the supermarket. So these are really interesting questions. It made me think about the structures of that society. You know, it's still a colonial society. How does the economy function, etc. So it allows me to explore larger questions, as well as, you know, as a filmmaker, I'm really interested in how chickens move, the colors, etc., the textures. Yeah. So
Yeah. Is it my turn to ask a question? Okay. So I think I'm going to allow the questions from the audience, but before that, I really like the story about how you see travel as a way of exploring new horizons, new ways of thinking, and I think as a scholar from a migrant background, especially from the global south, I think it's really important to reclaim cosmopolitanism, to reclaim the kind of ways of making connection to other cultures, because often this is not always available to us, especially, well, I grew up in a third world country. Yeah. This is not always accessible, or it's accessible by a certain class with a particular privilege. So I think, you know, traveling as a way to learn and sort of reclaiming cosmopolitanism for learning, for solidarity, rather than for, you know, consumption from the capitalist structures. I think it's really important. I'm just going to skip this the question, because perhaps people have, you know, questions over there.
Yeah, but also I agree with you, Intan. I think it's really important. But even like notions like cosmopolitanism, yes, we want to reclaim it, but we want to reclaim it in its best usage, in its criticality. I think that's really important. Like concepts like multiculturalism, even, you know, the CAL term, which I'm very uncomfortable about. So in a sense, I think if we want to use these terms, we have to impose upon them a criticality. Right, looking at structures, as you say, looking at what does this term, you know, who is being silenced with this term, right? What does it, but also what does it enable in a way? So in a sense, I think we have to politicize these terms. Yeah.
It's been controversial using this term.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I'm quite uncomfortable with that term because it is a term, like the CAL term is a term by the ABS, Yeah, so it's a statist term, right? It's about including and excluding people. Yeah.
In the UK, I talked with my colleague. They call BAME, right? Black
BAME.
and what is it?
Asian.
Asian
Minority.
Yes, I think it's our version still a little better. Comparing with that BAME, but I think I agree. But we need to define the term critically.
While waiting for maybe questions from the audience, let me know if you have questions. Maybe we can, because we already touched upon the term culturally and linguistically diverse scholars. Maybe you can follow up.
With this question, I think putting on the head of the coordinator of the CAL Scholar Network, then maybe the next question would be if you could tell us, maybe ask Iqbal first, if you could tell us more about your experience as a scholar with CAL, let me use this word because there's no other word that I can use that represent us better. And as a CAL, with CAL background, is there any advantage or disadvantage in your work coming from CAL background?
I mean, it's really interesting. So I think in a way, this term has to be used, as I said, in a kind of pragmatic, perhaps, maybe even a political way. I mean, as I mentioned, I'm really uncomfortable with that term because I think it's a term which is exclusionary, which excludes a lot of people. But at the same time, if we want to use the term, how do we, perhaps politicize it, introduce the criticality, as I mentioned, to the term. So in a way, I'm very happy to say, I'm ashamed to say, but I'm also at the same time, I'm quite happy to say, when I'm writing a grant application, I put in the term so to define myself. But in public, I don't, because I think it's a kind of term which is imposed from the outside on people within the society. But I mean, if we can find a way to use the term as a way to organize, like what you are doing, Chavalin, as a way of organizing a group of people, and I think that anything that allows us to do that is useful, right? In a way to basically highlight the kind of oppressive structures of the university, of the department. I think that is really useful work. So that's the political work that the term itself, allows us to do. And also I think, not to celebrate all aspects of just diversity for the sake of diversity, because I think that is a neoliberal concept, right? It's what Ala Sholat calls almost the kind of parading people. It's like, you just add more and more people as if that adds anything, to our understanding of the nexus between society and culture and politics. So, so I think that if we can recover that, and look at people who are employing this term in an interesting way, in a critical way. I mean, as a filmmaker, the works of filmmakers excite me. Someone like Anna Kokinos, for example, the Melbourne-based, filmmaker. I think, those are the kind of works that I want to celebrate as works coming from CAL, people from CAL background, CAL artists. Yeah, I like the word diaspora a lot though, because I think that, that word is kind of useful because it also shows the kind of implications, the mutual implications between different communities within a particular space. So I'm not that uncomfortable using the word diaspora as I am using the word CAL.
So is there any challenges that you find as a diaspora researcher?
Yeah, I mean,
Is
you
there
know,
any-
as we all have said, right, you know, there is always essentialisms, you know, there are binaries which we always, you know, have to fight against, you know, and they always want to place you in a, and I've been told that many times. I said, you know, and this is sometimes these honest conversations with like arts funding bodies, etc., is invigorating because it tells you exactly what people think of you, where they place you. And you know, I mean, I think institutions want to do that. They want to place people, and usually they place people in corners, and so we have to fight to get out of
Yeah.
those corners. Yeah. So, but at the same time, as I mentioned, you know, if we can use the term in a way that allows
A
us to
collective
organize,
voice,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's really pretty useful. You know, yeah. And if it helps artists get funding, why not?
Yeah,
Arts funding is very difficult.
How about you, Intan? Did you find being a CALL scholar um, advantageous or disadvantageous?
Well, it's actually an advantage for the university, although they don't always see it. Because we as, I would say, my perspective as a woman of color from the global south, okay, that's another term, and bringing different cultures, different perspectives. What I always see whenever, okay, let's just talk about media. When I see what's available on screen, often I don't see myself. So we often deal with invisibility. It's part of our practice, daily practice. We often deal with questions. How do you make yourself important, or what you do important? How to articulate that in a clever way, so you won't get pigeonholed. I think that that the kind of like everyday how we navigate with these structures influences let's say the subjects that we choose, the readings that we choose in class, when we teach, the media that we choose, or if you teach films, the films that you choose in class, you probably want to diversifying the syllabus is just the first step, right? But it's still an important step. You really want to interrogate a particular representation, so everything is kind of embodied in your selection of research, your selection of teaching. Yeah, I guess I will just keep it there, because I know Chavalin, you as the initiator of the CALL Scholar Network, you've done an important thing in this space. You want to talk more? No, I'm asking the
Thank you.
question.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of you completely. But with the advantage, I think it's being a CALL scholar, it's kind of enriching us. As a linguist myself, I feel like I can get a better and wider access to the original resources. So I can, because I read the language, and then also with people and networking opportunity, it's increased my the familiarity between me and my and other people in that community. So that's something that I find very very helpful to my research. But on the other hand, like being a member of multiple cultures, kind of sometimes I have to be careful that sometimes it can be challenging that I cannot distance myself from my own culture. So sometimes I have to take time to move again across internal space within myself. This is okay. I look at Thai culture as a researcher and not a Thai people and that kind. And also I look at Japanese again as a linguist, not as a person who live in Japan for over 10 years, for example. So I think that kind of thing can be challenging. And the other thing that I'm not sure about others, but for me as a non-native speaker of English, it's difficult for me in the research communication. So I think I got a lot of things to say, but I couldn't phrase it well because I don't know the words. So that's another challenge that I have to kind of trying to overcome in my career.
Yeah, Sarah, you have a question?
I'm interested that all of you were international students. Iqbal, you at in Sydney, Chavalin, you
In Japan,
and
yeah.
Intan, you in the USA. So when you are teaching students, how do you consciously kind of bring your own diverse perspective into the classroom? And do you ever find there's a tension between, wanting to teach students about, the context that they may not be aware of if they're, say, not CAL students? Or do you really try to expose students to diverse viewpoints and examples and case studies in the sort of decolonized curriculum?
Yeah. Anyone would like to? Okay, so actually, this leads to our final question. Actually,
Yes, good question.
Good question. So I guess I used my background to. I would love to keep exploring how to tell a story about my background to sort of. I hate the word empower, but to let my students know that I've been there. Because like Chavalin, I mean, I grew up in Indonesia. We didn't speak much English. So when I first got to the U.S., did my master's in a seminar class, I didn't know what to say. I mean, I had a lot of things in my head, but I just couldn't speak. Yeah. So and then I found that my students had the same experience. They articulating in a precise language. Also, they had sometimes some of them had problems with readings as well because they come from a different academic or different cultural background. So I guess if we want to support international students, I guess our stories matter. How we had our challenges, and to make them aware that this is okay. And then because of the global cultural inequalities, I'm so sorry, everything is in English. We wish we had readings from different languages, and then just to say that it's okay. I think it's really important to have that kind of more emotional connection with the students. So because often international students feel kind of alone, culturally and linguistically.
Yeah. I think myself the same. I use empathy in my teaching because I've been there, as I told you at the beginning, when I was in Japan, the first few years, and the study about ancient Japanese, I was like, I'd gone blank. I didn't know what was going on in the classrooms. I feel the same. I just feel for the international student who came, and then had to study things that they are not familiar with. So, and I think what I usually do is I try to first understand where they're coming from, how they will understand this. Like I try to give a lot of examples because it might connect with someone in the classroom. So this example for this one is for that one. And then I tell them that we have many ways to access to the resources, so feel free to access to whatever you feel that you learn. And then I think everybody wants to be heard and want to be respected. So whenever someone says something, I just wait for them to finish their sentence and then try to confirm my understanding and then share that point of view in class to ensure them that whatever they say that's valuable and they are one of the valuable members of the class.
Yeah, and I think, like what both of you are saying, I think to encourage our students to think about knowledge production as a global endeavor. Like for example, if we are discussing feminism, for example, we can think about how feminists in different countries, think about these concepts and actually, perhaps deepen the idea of feminism. And I think that's really useful. Like for example, I teach filmmaking, and if I'm teaching a particular theme, a particular concept in filmmaking practice, I think the advantage, perhaps maybe I wouldn't use the word advantage, but I think what part of my practice is showing that there are examples from all around the world which are exploring ideas, and what happens when this particular theme is being explored in India as opposed to being explored in China, for example. And I think that, but I don't think my position there is unique. I really think that's what every single academic in the world is probably doing. I think that in a way the university are quite unique spaces. They are progressive spaces. At least I believe that that's what happens in a university classroom. We also are very interested in showing the importance of indigenous knowledges as well, local knowledges. So I also, many of my students, for example, don't want to watch Australian films. So I think it's part of the imperative for me to bring examples from Australian cinema to show them what a great cinematic tradition that we have in Australia, especially films made by indigenous filmmakers, but also, made by white male filmmakers, like one of my favorite Australian films is Ballabo, so yeah.
Okay, so I think we're at the end of our session. Maybe can I just ask one last question to Chavalin? Do you have any plans, because you're initiating this fantastic, can we call it movement? Call this the Called Scholars Network, and you are also in the space of supporting international students. Do you want to talk more a little bit about your plans?
Yeah,
for
the
future?
mission of this group, for CALL Scholars and culturally and linguistically diverse scholars, we established this group because I take it as the same as the way that the university label ECR, MCR, the early career researcher, mid-career researcher, and then I think CALL is another kind of category that we can kind of put in the politicalize in your work. I think that's the way to make how scholar become more visible. And then I think it's not just the challenge that we face, but it's also the contribution that we can make to the university. Like you say, university usually kind of has advantage from having CALL scholar, but they are not aware of it. They didn't acknowledge that as much. So I think the plan now it just started from within the call, but the members are growing, and I got more interested members from other departments. So if possible, I think I want to increase more members to the faculty and more to the university, so that we can have a collective voice that kind of like to be a platform where we can share our knowledge and share our challenges if we need some unique support in particular. Because I feel like people say like, you are all different, how can you be in the same group? And I feel like, well, we are all the same because of the fact that we are all different. So we are different, and that's why we are the same. You understand?
Yeah.
So I feel like for international students, we want to call them CALL students as well. So we want to welcome them into this space, HDR students, and if possible, later professional staff as well. So we want to be as inclusive as possible. So yeah, any idea that you have, please share with me, and you're very welcome to join us.
Cool. Yeah.
Great. I guess, yeah, so my last words would be, there will be, so this is just a PSA, there will be a meet and greet for international students of MCCALL, so on the 18th of May, so check your email if you're international students. So I would like to thank Iqbal and Chavalin for joining us today, and thank you very much for people in the audience for patiently listening to us. Thank you, and thanks to Mike as well. So I'll see you next time with MCCALL Voices.
And thank you, Intan,
Thank
for
you, Intan.
organizing this. Really well organized. Thank you.